I was standing in my greenhouse when I realized my business might not survive the month. The air inside still smelled like damp soil and fresh cedar the way it always did in the morning. Usually that smell grounded me. It reminded me why I started Oakhaven Ecology in the first place: native plants, sustainable landscapes, real work that actually mattered. But that morning, all I could smell was panic. I was holding a letter in my hand. Official, clean, polite, a cancellation notice. My biggest municipal client had just pulled out of a 6-month restoration contract. No warning, no complaints, no negotiation. Just gone. I read it 3 times like the words might rearrange themselves into something less damaging if I stared long enough. They didn't. And the worst part, this wasn't the first time. It was the 3rd major contract I'd lost in less than 4 weeks. 3. That doesn't happen by accident. I leaned against the potting table and tried to think through it logically. Maybe budget cuts. Maybe a shift in priorities. Maybe some new consultant came in and wanted to shake things up. But 3 different clients all pulling out suddenly, all using the same careful, vague language. That wasn't coincidence. That was a pattern. And I had no idea what I had done to deserve it. I checked my email again. Nothing new, no complaints, no bad reviews, no legal notices. My accounts were clean, my projects were on schedule, my team was small but solid. On paper, everything looked fine. In reality, I was bleeding money. I folded the letter slowly and set it down next to the others. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Don't forget dinner tonight. Your father wants everyone there." Of course he did. Sunday dinner wasn't optional in my family. It never had been. It didn't matter if I was busy, tired, or quietly watching my business collapse in real time. If Marcus said dinner, you showed up. I stared at the message for a second, then typed back, "I'll be there." Because not showing up would cause more problems than I could afford. Their house looked exactly the way it always did. Too clean, too staged, like nobody actually lived there, they just performed living. When I walked in, I could already hear laughter from the dining room. Loud, confident, the kind of laughter that assumes everything is going exactly right. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and took a breath before walking in. Cassidy was already there, of course. She was standing near the table holding a glass of champagne like she'd been born with it in her hand. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect smile. My sister didn't just walk into a room. She arrived. "Valerie," she said, like she was pleasantly surprised I existed, "you made it." "I live 20 minutes away," I said, setting my bag down. Still, she smiled. "I know how busy you are, saving the environment and all." There it was. 5 seconds in. My mother Lucille appeared right behind her with another glass. "Here," she said, handing me champagne before I could say no. "We're celebrating. Celebrating what I asked, even though I already knew." Cassidy's smile widened just a little. "My ribbon cutting is next week," she said. "The condos are finally ready. Multi-million-dollar luxury units. Downtown, high-profile investors. The kind of project that gets your face in magazines." "Congrats," I said. And I meant it. Or at least I meant the version of it that didn't require me to feel anything. My father raised his glass from the head of the table. To Cassidy, he said, "Proof that hard work pays off." I took a small sip and sat down. Dinner started normally enough. Food passed around, small talk, updates that weren't really updates. And then, right on schedule, my mother turned to me. So she said lightly, "How's your little plant business doing?" "Little." I kept my expression neutral. "It's fine." "Really," she said, tilting her head, "because I heard you lost another contract." Of course she had. "Clients change direction sometimes," I said. "It happens." She nodded like she didn't believe a word I said. "Well, you know, there's no shame in pivoting." "Pivoting," I repeated. Cassidy leaned back in her chair, watching. "Your sister could use someone with your skill set," my mother continued. "Landscaping around the properties, maintenance, gardening." There it was. Not even subtle. "You mean working for her," I said. Lucille smiled. "Helping family." I let out a quiet breath. "I already run my own company." "For now," she said, just soft enough to sound kind. Cassidy didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The look on her face said everything. Amusement, curiosity, like she was watching something slowly break. I set my fork down. I'm not looking for a job. Of course not, my father said quickly. We're just offering support. Support. That word always sounded different coming from him. Dinner moved on after that, but the tone had shifted. Every comment felt like it had an edge. Every glance lingered a little too long. By the time dessert came out, I was done. I stayed just long enough to make it polite, then grabbed my bag and left. No one tried to stop me. I realized I left my jacket the next morning. I almost didn't go back for it. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't even my favorite, but something about leaving it there bothered me more than it should have. So I drove back. The house was quiet when I pulled up. No cars in the driveway except my mother's. That wasn't unusual. She liked having the place to herself. I walked up to the front door, reached for the handle, and then I heard her voice. Not inside the house. Outside. Coming from the side window near the kitchen. I froze. It wasn't what she was saying at first. It was how she was saying it. Soft, careful, controlled. I stepped closer just enough to hear. Yes, she said. That's exactly what I'm concerned about. A pause. No, I understand the paperwork looks fine. That's not the issue. Another pause. My stomach tightened. It's her mental state, Lucille continued. Valerie has been unstable lately, emotional, erratic. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I wouldn't say this if it wasn't serious, she added. She's under a lot of pressure. Financially, things aren't going well. I'm worried she might not be able to fulfill her obligations. My hand dropped from the door. No, of course I don't want to cause problems, she said gently. I just think the city should protect itself before something happens. Protect itself. From me. There was a pause longer this time. Then she smiled. I could hear it in her voice. I appreciate your discretion. The call ended. And I didn't move. I just stood there staring at the ground, trying to process what I had just heard. My own mother, calling my clients, telling them I was unstable, telling them I was going under, making sure they walked away. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't concern. This was deliberate, precise, and it explained everything. The cancellations, the silence, the sudden shift in tone from clients who had trusted me for years. I should have walked in. I should have confronted her right there in that kitchen and demanded an explanation. But I didn't, because in that moment something else took over. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I took a step back. Then another. Staying out of sight. Staying quiet. Because if this was what she was willing to do behind my back, then I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a strategy. And as I backed away into the shadow of the driveway, one thing became painfully clear. My business wasn't failing on its own. It was being dismantled, and I needed to know why. I got into my car without going back for the jacket, and this time I didn't hesitate about where I was going. My hands were still shaking when I started the engine. Not in a dramatic way, not panic, just that low, steady tremor you get when your brain is trying to catch up with something it doesn't want to accept. I pulled out of the driveway and drove straight to Julian's office. No calls, no second guessing. If my parents were actively tearing down my business, then this wasn't something I could figure out later. I needed facts. I needed proof. And more importantly, I needed to know how deep this went. Julian was the only person I trusted to find it. His office was still lit when I got there, which wasn't surprising. Julian didn't really operate on normal hours. Numbers didn't care what time it was, and neither did he. I walked in without knocking. He looked up from his desk glasses halfway down his nose. You look like you just found out taxes got extended another year. Worse, I said. That got his attention. I didn't sit. I just dropped my bag on the chair across from him and said, I need you to go through everything. He blinked. That's broad. My business accounts. Personal accounts. Credit. Contracts. Anything tied to me, I said. I want you to find anything someone could be using against me. Julian leaned back slowly. Okay, that's not a small ask. You want to tell me why? I took a breath. My mother's been calling my clients, I said, telling them I'm unstable, that I'm going bankrupt. He stared at me for a second. That's bold. 3 major contracts gone in a month, I added. No explanation. No warning. And you think that's just the surface? I think I said carefully, if they're willing to do that, then there's probably something else I'm not seeing. Julian studied my face like he was trying to decide how serious this was. Then he nodded. All right, he said, pulling his keyboard closer. If there's something there, I'll find it. I'm giving you full access, I said. Everything. He raised an eyebrow. That includes things you might not like. I already don't like what's happening, I said. Dig. He gave a small, approving nod. Good answer. The first day felt manageable. The second day didn't. By the third, it started to get irritating. Not because of Julian. He was doing exactly what I asked. Quiet, focused, sending me occasional updates that mostly said still digging. No, the problem was Cassidy. She texted me every single day. Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? I heard things have been tough lately. Let me know if you need anything. Seriously, Val, if you need help with groceries or bills, I can send something over. It was always polite, always sweet, and completely fake. I stared at one of her messages while sitting in my office surrounded by invoices and spreadsheets that suddenly felt heavier than they used to. Need help with groceries. I ran a business. A real one. I had employees, clients, projects that actually mattered. And she was offering to cover my grocery bill like I was a college kid who forgot how to budget. I typed back, I'm fine. She replied almost instantly. Of course you are. Just don't be too proud to ask for help. I set my phone face down on the desk. That was the game. Not just taking things from me, making sure I looked small while they did it. By day 5, I understood something important. They thought I was already losing, which meant I couldn't let them see anything different. So I leaned into it. I stopped pushing back. When my mother called, I sounded tired. When Cassidy texted, I responded slower, shorter, less confident. At Sunday dinner, I showed up in the same sweater twice. I let the silence hang a little longer before answering questions. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I let them believe exactly what they wanted to believe, that I was overwhelmed, that I was slipping, that I was exactly where they needed me to be. It wasn't hard. All I had to do was stop correcting them. Julian didn't call for a few days after that, which in his world meant he was either finding nothing or finding something big. I tried not to think about it too much. Tried. But every time my phone buzzed, I checked it. Every time it wasn't him, I felt that same tight pull in my chest. Then just after midnight on a Thursday, my phone rang. Julian. I answered immediately. Tell me you found something. There was a pause. Can you come in, he said. That was enough. I'm on my way. His office felt different at night. Quieter, more focused, like whatever happened there after dark mattered more. Julian didn't waste time when I walked in. He turned his monitor toward me. I didn't find anything wrong with your business, he said. For half a second, I felt relief. Then he continued. I found something wrong with you. I frowned. What does that mean? He tapped the screen. At some point in the last 6 months, a lien was placed on your commercial property. I blinked. No, it wasn't. That's what you'd think, he said. Except it was. My stomach dropped. How much, I asked. $400,000. I stared at him. That's not possible, I said. I never signed anything like that. I know, he said. He zoomed in on the document. Because you didn't. There it was. My name. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not really. It looked like it. Close enough that most people wouldn't question it. But there were small differences. Pressure points. Letter spacing. The kind of details only someone trained to look would notice. Who's it tied to, I asked, even though I already felt the answer forming. Julian clicked again. Cassidy Estates, LLC. Of course. Of course it was. They used your land as collateral, he said, for a construction loan tied to your sister's condo project. I felt like the room had tilted slightly. Wait, I said slowly. So if that loan defaults, Julian finished, the bank comes after the collateral. My land. Your land. Silence filled the room. And if your business fails, he added, you're in no position to fight it. I looked back at the screen. At the forged signature. At the clean professional language that turned my property into leverage for something I had nothing to do with. They're trying to push me into bankruptcy, I said. Julian nodded once. That would make this very easy for them. And then what? He didn't hesitate. They take the land. How? They already have a lien on it. If you default, the bank forecloses. Your sister's company can buy it for a fraction of its value. For what? Julian gave a small, humorless smile. Parking, he said. Based on the zoning plans, they're going to need additional space once the condos open. A parking lot. They were going to turn everything I built into a parking lot. I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, because it was so clean, so efficient, so completely thought out. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted to use me on the way down. I wasn't competition. I was funding. The room felt very quiet again. I didn't realize I was crying until I wiped my face. It wasn't dramatic, just there, like my body needed a minute to process what my brain already understood. Julian didn't say anything. He just waited. And then, just as quickly as it came, it stopped. The sadness. Gone. Replaced by something else. Something sharper. I looked back at the screen, at my name, at the signature that wasn't mine. And for the first time since this started, everything made sense. The canceled contracts. The pressure. The timing. They weren't reacting to my failure. They were creating it. Because the faster I fell, the faster they got what they wanted. I took a slow breath, then another. And then I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and stood up. Julian watched me. "What are you doing?" I unlocked the screen. "I'm done trying to understand them," I said. I found the number I needed. "I'm going to talk to someone who knows how to deal with this." I hit call. "A real estate lawyer," I said as the line started to ring. I listened to the phone ring once, then hung up before it could connect because I already knew exactly how this was going to play out. They weren't done. People who build something this calculated don't stop halfway through. They finish it. And sure enough, the next morning my father called. Not texted. Not a casual check-in. A call. "Dinner tonight," Marcus said, like he was confirming a meeting, not inviting me to one. "We need to talk." There was a pause just long enough to make it clear this wasn't optional. "About what?" I asked. "Family business," he said. "Be here at 7. Then he hung up. No explanation. No room to say no. I stared at my phone for a second, then set it down. Emergency family meeting. Right. I showed up exactly at 7, wearing the same gray sweater I'd worn earlier that week. Not by accident. Hair pulled back, no makeup, no effort to look like I had anything under control. If they wanted to see someone falling apart, I was happy to give them the performance. The house was already set when I walked in. Table arranged, plates out, everything clean and deliberate, like always. Cassidy was seated this time, scrolling through her phone like she had better places to be. My mother was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy. My father stood near the head of the table, watching the door as I stepped in. "There you are," he said. "Sit." No hello. No smile. Just sit. I did. No one spoke for the first minute. Just the sound of silverware water being poured, the quiet shuffle of people getting comfortable. It felt less like dinner and more like a meeting already in progress. Then Marcus cleared his throat. "We're going to keep this simple," he said. That was new. He reached down beside his chair and pulled up a thick folder, legal paper, heavy. He placed it on the table in front of me and slid it across. It stopped right at my hands. I didn't touch it. "What is this?" I asked. "A solution," he said. Cassidy finally looked up. "You've been having a hard time," she added, like she was doing me a favor by acknowledging it. I said nothing. Marcus tapped the folder once. "Your business is failing. Flat, direct, no pretending this time. You've lost multiple contracts," he continued. "Revenue is down. And from what we understand, you're struggling to keep things afloat." "From what we understand." I almost smiled. Cassidy leaned forward slightly. "And we don't want to see you go under, Val." "Of course not. That would be inconvenient." So Marcus continued, "Your sister has made a generous offer." There it was. I rested my hand lightly on the folder but didn't open it yet. "What kind of offer?" I asked. "To buy your land," he said. Straight to the point. "To take the burden off your shoulders before things get worse." I opened the folder. The contract was clean, professional, already prepared. Purchase agreement. Buyer Cassidy Estates, LLC. Seller me. I flipped through the pages slowly, not because I needed to read them, but because I wanted to see how far they'd gone with this. Price. I stopped there. For a second, I thought I was reading it wrong. Then I looked again. No, I wasn't. It was exact, down to the dollar. 400,000. Not a dollar more. Not a dollar less. Just enough to cover the lien. Nothing left for me. Nothing for the business. Nothing for the years I'd spent building something from nothing. Just enough to erase me cleanly. That's the number I asked. Marcus nodded. It clears your debt. My debt, I repeated. Cassidy tilted her head slightly. It's fair, Valerie. Fair. I let out a quiet breath and closed the folder halfway. So let me get this straight, I said. You want me to sell my property for exactly the amount that just happens to be tied to a lien I didn't authorize. There was a small pause. Not long, just enough. Marcus's expression didn't change. This is your way out, he said. You should take it. I looked at him. Really looked this time. There it was. No concern. No patience. Just expectation. Like this was already done and I was just catching up. And if I don't, I asked. That's when it shifted. Subtle at first. Then, not subtle at all. Marcus leaned back in his chair, and whatever version of father he'd been using up until that point disappeared completely. You don't have leverage here, he said. His voice was different now. Colder. Sharper. If you walk away from this, he continued, you will personally make sure every remaining client you have knows exactly what kind of risk you are. I didn't move. He kept going. I will call the bank. I will call your partners. I will make sure you are buried in litigation before the end of the quarter. Calm. Precise. Like he'd already thought through every step. You won't just lose the business, he added. You'll lose everything attached to it. I felt Cassidy watching me. Waiting. Lucille stayed quiet, but I could feel her attention too. Focused. Measured. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You are a dead end, he said, and the sooner you accept that, the better this goes for everyone. There it was. Not disappointment. Not frustration. Final judgment. And you owe your sister this, he added, after everything this family has done for you. I let that sit for a second. Just long enough. Then I reached for the pen. Cassidy's posture shifted immediately. Interested? Marcus didn't smile, but I saw it in his eyes. He thought this was over. I picked up the pen and flipped to the signature page. My name was already printed there. Clean. Waiting. I looked at it for a second. Then I looked up. At all of them. My father. My mother. My sister. 3 people who had already decided exactly how this was going to end. And for the first time since I walked in, I let myself really see it. Not the version they presented. The version underneath. The math. The timing. The planning. This wasn't desperation. This was execution. I lowered my eyes back to the paper. And signed. Not my normal signature. Not the one on my legal documents. Messier. Slightly off. Close enough to pass at a glance. Wrong enough to matter when it counted. I pressed just hard enough to make sure the carbon copy underneath caught everything. Then I lifted the pen and slid it back across the table. There, I said. Silence. Then Marcus reached forward, pulled the contract back toward him, and glanced at the signature. He didn't study it. He didn't need to. He saw what he expected to see. And that was enough. Cassidy leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Lucille exhaled slowly, like something had just been resolved. Marcus gave a small nod. Good, he said. Just like that. Done. I closed the folder gently and stood up. No one stopped me. No one said anything else. Because as far as they were concerned, there was nothing left to say. I walked to the door, picked up my bag, and stepped outside into the night air. The door clicked shut behind me, and I kept walking. Down the driveway, past the edge of the light, into the quiet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded carbon copy. The ink was still fresh. Every word, every number, every threat wrapped neatly in legal language. I looked at my signature. Then I folded the paper again and slipped it back into my purse. Because that document wasn't a loss. It wasn't a mistake. And it definitely wasn't a surrender. As I got into my car, one thing became very clear. They thought they had just closed the deal. But what they actually handed me was evidence. I slid the carbon copy across Maxine's desk and didn't say a word because the paper spoke for itself. She didn't react right away. Maxine was the kind of person who read things twice, not because she didn't understand them the first time, but because she wanted to see what everyone else missed. Her office matched her: clean, sharp, expensive without trying too hard. Floor-to-ceiling windows, neutral tones, not a single personal item in sight, nothing that could be used against her. She flipped through the forged lien first, then the contract, then back to the lien. Her expression didn't change, but the silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Finally, she looked up at me. "Your parents are either very confident," she said, "or very sloppy." "Which one is worse?" I asked. "For them," she said. "Confident." I leaned back slightly in the chair. "Tell me what I'm dealing with." She tapped the lien document. "This," she said, "is felony wire fraud. And this signature," she added, sliding the page slightly forward, "isn't even a good forgery." That's what Julian said. "I'm not surprised," she replied. "People who think they won't get caught usually stop trying halfway through." She closed the folder neatly. "Here's the part that matters," she continued. "That lien is tied to a construction loan." "I know." "Do you know how much?" I shook my head. $2.5 million, she said. I let that sit for a second. Then I nodded slowly. "Okay." Maxine watched me carefully. "You're not reacting," she said. "I already did that part last night," I replied. That almost got a smile out of her. "Good," she said. "Then we can skip to strategy." She leaned forward slightly. "If the bank is informed that the collateral securing that loan was obtained through fraud, they can call the entire loan immediately." Meaning your sister doesn't get time to fix it," Maxine said. "She doesn't get to refinance. She doesn't get to negotiate. The bank pulls the plug. And the condos." She shrugged lightly. "They become a very expensive problem." I looked down at the documents again. "So all I have to do is tell the bank." "Yes," she said. "That's the clean move." Clean. Efficient. Simple. I nodded once. Then I shook my head. "No." Maxine's eyes narrowed slightly. "No," she repeated. "That ends it too fast," I said. She leaned back, studying me again. "Explain." I tapped the lien with my finger. "They didn't just try to take my land," I said. "They tried to make me disappear while doing it." She didn't interrupt. "They called my clients," I continued. "They set this up so I would fail first." Maxine nodded once. "That tracks. So if I just go to the bank," I said, "they lose the loan." "Fine. And that's not enough," she finished. I met her eyes. "No." There was a pause. Then she gave a small, almost approving nod. "All right," she said. "Let's make it uncomfortable." I spent the next 2 hours going through every detail of Cassidy's project. Permits, zoning, access, timelines. The kind of things I normally didn't care about, until one line stopped me. I leaned closer to the screen. "Wait," I said. Maxine glanced over. "What?" I pointed. "This access road." She followed my finger. "What about it?" "It's not on her property," I said. "No," Maxine confirmed. "It's a municipal easement." I sat back slowly. "No," I said again. "Not exactly." She looked at me more closely this time. "What are you seeing?" I pulled up another file, then another, and then I turned the screen toward her. "My company leases that strip," I said, "for ecological preservation. It's part of a restoration agreement with the city." Maxine didn't say anything right away. She just stared at the screen. Then she smiled. Not a big smile, just enough. "Does your sister know that?" she asked. I shook my head. "No." "Does the city?" "Yes." "And who controls access rights under that lease?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Maxine leaned back in her chair. "Well," she said calmly, "that's a problem." "For her," I said. "For her," she confirmed. I felt something settle into place. Clean. Clear. "You said she needs final occupancy permits," I said. "She does. And without legal access, she doesn't get them." Silence filled the room for a second. Then Maxine folded her hands. "What do you want to do with that?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "I want it locked," I said. "How locked?" "Irrevocable," I replied. "No last-minute deals, no pressure, no way around it." Maxine nodded slowly. "An eco-trust would do it," she said. "Once it's in place, it can't be undone without a court order." "Good." She watched me for another second. "You understand what this does," she said. "This doesn't just slow her down. I know. It stops everything. I know." And once she realizes why, I stood up. "She'll come to me." Maxine gave a small, satisfied nod. "All right," she said. "Let's make it official." The paperwork moved fast after that, faster than I expected. By the next morning, the access rights were locked into an irrevocable eco-trust tied to the preservation terms of my lease. No shortcuts. No exceptions. No signatures except mine. I didn't call anyone. I didn't warn them. I just waited. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I was at the nursery going through orders when I heard tires hit gravel harder than necessary. I didn't need to look. I already knew. The door slammed. Fast footsteps. Then Cassidy's voice. "What did you do?" I set the clipboard down slowly and turned. She looked different. Not polished. Not composed. Angry. "You want to try that again?" I asked. "My permits got denied," she snapped. "The city says I don't have legal access to the property." I tilted my head slightly. "That sounds like a problem." "Don't play dumb," she said, stepping closer. "This is your lease, your stupid environmental thing." "Ecological preservation," I corrected. "I don't care what you call it," she shot back. "You need to release it." I didn't move. "No." The word landed harder than I expected. She blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. Her expression shifted, from anger to disbelief. "You don't get to say no," she said. I reached into the folder on the table and pulled out a single sheet. Then I held it out to her. "Take a look." She hesitated for half a second, then grabbed it. Her eyes moved across the page, stopped, went back, then widened. The lien. 400,000. Her company's name. My forged signature. She looked up at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I just met her eyes and said, "You don't own me anymore." Silence. Heavy. Sharp. And by Friday, I added calmly, "You won't own those condos either." Something in her face broke. Not completely. Just enough. She stepped back like she needed distance to think. "This isn't over," she said. "I know," I replied. She turned and walked out fast. Not controlled. Not polished. Just fast. The door slammed again. I stood there for a second listening to the sound of her SUV tearing out of the driveway. Then the silence came back. I walked to the window and watched her car disappear down the road, and I already knew what was coming next. Because people like my family don't admit they're cornered. They change the story. They go louder. They go public. They try to make you the problem before anyone notices they are. I turned back toward the nursery already, thinking 3 steps ahead. Because if that was their next move, I was ready for it. I didn't even make it through the next morning before the story about me went public. It started small. A message from one of my remaining clients. "Hey, is everything okay?" New context. No details. Just that tone people use when they already think something is wrong but don't want to say it out loud. Then another message came in, and another. By noon, I didn't need to ask what was happening. I opened my phone, typed my name into the local Facebook groups, and there it was. My mother's post. Long, emotional, carefully written. She had a photo of me from years ago, smiling, relaxed, harmless. The kind of picture that makes everything sound more believable. The caption started with concern. Sharing this as a mother who is deeply worried. I kept reading. It escalated quickly. According to her, I had been struggling for months. My business was collapsing. I was not thinking clearly. I had become erratic and fixated on sabotaging my own sister out of jealousy. And the part that almost made me laugh, she said I was trying to extort Cassidy. Extort. Using what? My own property. My own legal rights. It didn't matter. The post wasn't about facts. It was about framing, and she framed it perfectly. Concerned mother. Successful sister. Unstable daughter. Simple. Clean. Easy to believe. The comments were worse. I always thought something was off about her. So sad. Mental health is no joke. Cassidy has worked so hard. She doesn't deserve this. People I didn't know. People I had never met. And somehow they all had opinions about me. I set my phone down slowly. Not because I was shocked. Because I wasn't. This is what people do when they can't win quietly. They go public. By the end of the day, the damage was already visible. One client paused their contract. Another asked for time to reassess. A third stopped responding altogether. No accusations. No direct confrontation. Just distance. I went to the grocery store that evening, out of habit more than anything else. Same place I'd been going to for years. Same aisles. Same routine. But it didn't feel the same. People looked. Not openly. Not enough to be called out. But enough. 2 women near the produce section lowered their voices when I walked past. A man near the checkout glanced at me, then at his phone, then back at me again. I paid for my groceries, bagged them myself, and walked out without saying a word. Because what exactly was I supposed to say? No, I'm not unstable, I'm just being strategically dismantled by my own family. That doesn't really land in a checkout line. The next morning, my father escalated it. Of course he did. A post wasn't enough for him. Marcus liked a stage. He called a town hall meeting. Public. Official. The kind of thing that shows up in local news feeds and makes people feel like they're watching something important. The topic? Community concern regarding misuse of municipal land. Translation: me. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I just showed up. The room was already half full when I walked in. City officials, local business owners, people who like to attend anything that sounded dramatic. I didn't sit up front. I didn't announce myself. I took a seat in the back row, quiet, out of the way, and I waited. Marcus stood at the podium like he belonged there, confident, controlled, every word prepared. He looked exactly like a man trying to save his community. My daughter, he began, is not well. Straight to it. No hesitation. She has been under significant emotional stress, he continued. Her business is failing, and unfortunately, she has started making decisions that are harmful not only to herself but to others. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Let him talk. Right now, he said, she is blocking access to a development that will bring jobs, housing, and growth to this city. He paused. Let that sink in. She is using a technicality to hold that project hostage. Not fraud. Not forgery. Not extortion. A technicality. I almost admired the simplicity. I'm not here as a developer, Marcus continued. I'm here as a father. Of course he was. A father who is asking this city to intervene before things get worse. He looked toward the mayor. My daughter needs help, he said. Not property rights. There it was. Clean, direct, and completely false. The room shifted slightly. People nodded. Some whispered. Some just watched. I didn't move. I let him keep going. Every word, every claim, every carefully constructed lie. Because the more he said, the more he committed to it, and the more valuable it became. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Not obvious. Not dramatic. Just enough to start recording. Audio. Clear. Public. Permanent. Marcus went on for another 5 minutes. Then 10. He talked about responsibility. About family, about community. He never mentioned the lien, never mentioned the forged signature, never mentioned the part where they tried to take everything I built and turn it into a parking lot. Of course he didn't. That part doesn't fit the story. Eventually he stepped back. The room went quiet. The mayor looked out across the audience. Is Valerie here? He asked. A few heads turned. I stood up. Slow. No rush. No performance. Just stood. I'm here, I said. The room shifted again. More attention now. More curiosity. Would you like to respond? The mayor asked. I walked forward a few steps. Not all the way to the podium. Just enough. I could feel every eye in the room on me. Waiting. Judging. Deciding. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the mayor, and I kept it simple. The truth, I said, will be presented at my sister's ribbon-cutting gala. That was it. No explanation. No defense. No argument. Just a statement. Then I turned and walked out. The door closed behind me and the noise of the room cut off instantly. I didn't stop walking. Didn't look back. Because I already knew what was happening inside. Confusion. Speculation. Curiosity. Exactly what I needed. By the time I got to my car, my phone was already buzzing again. Messages, calls, questions. I ignored all of them because the story wasn't ready yet. Later that night, I checked the event listing. The ribbon cutting had been moved up. Of course it had. Marcus and Lucille weren't going to wait. They thought what happened at the town hall meant I was backing down, that I didn't have anything real, that I was stalling. So they did what they always do. They went bigger. The guest list expanded. Investors, city officials, media, 300 people give or take. A stage, a microphone, a perfect place to control the narrative. I set my phone down and sat back in my chair. Because they weren't wrong about one thing. That event was going to decide everything. They just didn't realize. They weren't the ones controlling it anymore. I checked the time on my phone one last time before stepping out of the car because timing was the only thing tonight that actually mattered. The building looked exactly the way it was supposed to. Glass, light, expensive everything. The kind of place that makes people feel important just for being inside it. The entrance was lined with soft lighting and perfectly dressed staff holding trays of champagne. Guests moved in small groups, laughing too loudly, shaking hands like every conversation might turn into an opportunity. 300 people, give or take. Investors, city officials, people who like to be seen near money. And right at the center of it all, my sister's project. I stepped out and adjusted the sleeve of my jacket. Tailored, clean, dark enough to be serious, sharp enough to stand out. Nothing about me looked unstable. Nothing about me looked like I was falling apart. And that was the point. I walked past the entrance without slowing down. No invitation. No hesitation. Inside, the room opened up into a wide, polished space. Silk draped along the walls, soft music in the background, a stage at the far end with a massive screen behind it, cycling through polished renders of the condos. Everything looked perfect. Of course it did. That's what people invest in. Not reality. Presentation. I moved through the crowd quietly, not hiding, just not announcing myself. A few people glanced at me, then looked away. They didn't recognize me. Not yet. That didn't last long. Lucille saw me first. She was standing near the stage talking to someone I didn't recognize, smiling in that controlled, practiced way she used when she needed to look warm. Then her eyes shifted, locked onto me, and the smile disappeared. Just like that. It was quick. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I did. Her body stiffened. Her hand tightened around her glass, and then she leaned slightly toward one of the staff members and said something under her breath. Security. Of course. 2 men near the entrance straightened and started moving in my direction. I didn't stop. I didn't turn. I just kept walking, because I wasn't alone. Maxine stepped into view beside me like she had always been there. Calm. Controlled, completely unimpressed by everything around her. On my other side, the bank executive adjusted his cuff and glanced toward the approaching security with mild annoyance, like they were interrupting something far more important. The shift was immediate. Security slowed, then stopped. Because suddenly, I wasn't just an uninvited guest. I was standing next to the person who could collapse a $2.5 million loan with a phone call. Lucille saw it. And for the first time that night, she looked unsure. I almost smiled. Almost. I didn't make it far before Marcus intercepted me. Near the kitchen doors, away from the main crowd. Of course he didn't want an audience for this part. He stepped directly into my path, close enough that no one else would hear him. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled, but not calm. I met his eyes. "Attending," I said. "You weren't invited." And yet I replied, glancing around, "Here I am." His jaw tightened. He leaned in slightly. "You think this is going to work," he said. "You think walking in here changes anything." I didn't answer. I just watched him. Because the more he talked, the more he showed. "You are embarrassing yourself," he continued. "And more importantly, you're embarrassing this family." There it was. Not concern. Reputation. Always reputation. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." I tilted my head slightly. "Or what?" That's when it slipped. Just a little. That controlled tone cracked, and something sharper came through. "You are the family disgrace," he said quietly, "and the second those speeches are over, you're out." There it was. Clear. Honest. No pretending anymore. I nodded once. "Good to know," I said. And then I stepped around him. Because I didn't need to win that conversation. I just needed him to have it. The room shifted as the lights dimmed slightly. Music lowered. Attention moved toward the stage. It was time. Cassidy walked up like she belonged there. Because she thought she did. Applause hit immediately. Loud. Confident. Automatic. She smiled, took her place at the center, and adjusted the microphone. Behind her, the screen shifted to a full display of the condos, perfect angles, perfect lighting, everything designed to look like success. She let the applause settle. Then she started. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "I couldn't have done this without the support of this incredible community." "Of course not." She paused just long enough to let the room lean in, and despite some challenges along the way, she continued, her tone softening slightly. We pushed through. There it was. The setup. Subtle. Controlled. "Family isn't always easy," she added, giving a small emotional smile. "But sometimes those challenges make you stronger." A few people nodded. Some even smiled back. They had no idea. She went on about vision, about hard work, about resilience. Words that sound impressive when you don't look too closely at what they actually mean. Behind her, the screen cycled through more images. Clean lines. Luxury finishes. Everything designed to sell a story. Her story. "I designed this project to be more than just a place to live," she said. "It's a legacy." I stood at the back of the room. Quiet. Still. Watching. Listening. Every word landing exactly where she wanted it to. She believed it. That was the interesting part. She actually believed she had built this. That she had earned it. That this room, this moment, belonged to her. She reached for her glass. "And tonight," she said, lifting it slightly, "I want to thank everyone who believed in honesty, in hard work." Honesty. That word almost made me laugh. And in doing things the right way. The room responded exactly how it was supposed to. People reached for their glasses. Smiles. Nods. Approval. Perfect. I slipped my hand into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Unlocked. Ready. My thumb hovered over a single button, connected to the AV booth, where Julian was waiting. Everything in place. Everything timed. Cassidy raised her glass higher. "To honesty," she said. I looked at the screen, then at her, then back at the phone, and without rushing it, without hesitating, I pressed send. My thumb barely left the screen before everything behind Cassidy went black. No fade, no transition, just gone. The polished renders, the lighting, the illusion cut off mid-frame like someone pulled the plug on reality. For half a second, the room didn't understand what happened. Then the screen came back on, and the room gasped. Not politely, not quietly, a real collective reaction. Because what replaced it wasn't branding. It wasn't marketing. It was evidence. A massive split screen stretched across the entire 20-foot display. On the left, a legal document, clean, official, familiar, the $400,000 lien, my land, my name. And right beneath it, highlighted in sharp red, overlays the signatures. Marcus, Lucille, side by side with a forensic breakdown marking them as fraudulent. Clear, undeniable, impossible to explain away. On the right, the contract from dinner. The one they slid across the table like it was help. The purchase agreement. Cassidy Estates, LLC. The exact amount, $400,000. Every page visible. Every clause readable. No room for interpretation. The room shifted instantly. Confusion turned into noise. Low at first. Then building? What is that? Is this real? Is this part of the presentation? Cassidy didn't move. She stood frozen at the center of the stage, her glass still in her hand, her smile still halfway formed, like her face hadn't caught up with what was happening behind her. Then the sound system cut in. Not music. Not feedback. A voice. My mother's voice. Clear. Sharp. Unfiltered. "Yes," Lucille said through the speakers. That's exactly what I'm concerned about. The room went silent. Not the polite kind. The kind where people stop breathing for a second. No, I understand the paperwork looks fine, her voice continued. That's not the issue. I didn't rush. I stepped forward into the aisle and started walking. Slow, steady, every step deliberate. It's her mental state, Lucille's voice said. Valerie has been unstable lately, emotional, erratic. I could feel the attention shift as I moved, people turning, recognizing, connecting the name to the face. I wouldn't say this if it wasn't serious, the recording continued. She's under a lot of pressure. Financially, things aren't going well. My heels hit the floor in a steady rhythm as I walked down the center. No one stopped me. No one stepped in front of me. I'm worried she might not be able to fulfill her obligations. I reached the front, steps away from the stage. I just think the city should protect itself. Cassidy finally turned. Slow, like she was afraid of what she'd see. Our eyes met. For the first time that night, she understood. The recording ended, and the silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. I stepped up onto the stage. No one tried to stop me. Not security. Not my parents. Not even Cassidy. Because at this point, stopping me would only make it worse. I walked up beside her and reached for the microphone. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She just stood there, still holding her glass, still trying to process. I took the microphone, turned toward the room, and let the silence sit for one more second. Long enough. Then I spoke. My family told you I was unstable, I said. No emotion, no shake, just clear. They told you my business was failing, that I was making reckless decisions. I gestured lightly toward the screen. But as you can see, I continued, they committed felony wire fraud. A ripple moved through the crowd. They forged my name, I added, and used my land as collateral. I paused. Let it land. Then they tried to force me to sell that land back to them, I said, for the exact amount they stole. No one interrupted. No one spoke. They needed me to fail. I continued so they could take everything cleanly. I turned slightly, glancing at the floor beneath us. At a discount, I added. That got a reaction. Small, sharp. The kind of reaction people make when something clicks a second too late. And the building we are standing in right now, I said, looking back up, is funded by that fraud. That's when it hit. Not everyone at once, but enough. I saw it in their faces. The shift from curiosity to concern to calculation. Near the front, the bank executive stood up, fast. Not dramatic, just immediate. His face had gone pale. He looked from the screen, to Cassidy, to Marcus, then back to the screen, like he was hoping something would change if he checked twice. It didn't, because it couldn't. Behind me, I heard movement. Marcus stepping forward, Lucille saying something under her breath, Cassidy finally lowering her glass. Too late. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Everything you've been told about me, I said, was designed to make this moment easier for them. I gestured again toward the screen, to make sure no one asked questions. Silence. Heavy. Permanent. And then it broke. Not slowly. Not gracefully. Explosively. Voices. Loud. Overlapping. What is this? Is this real? You didn't tell us about this. Investors turned on each other. Phones came out. Calls started immediately. The string quartet stopped mid-note. One of them actually dropped their instrument. The sound cut through everything, sharp, wrong, perfect, because the illusion was gone, completely. No recovery, no spin. No way to put this back together in front of 300 people who had just watched the truth take over the room. Cassidy stepped back, actually stepped back, like the stage itself wasn't stable anymore. Marcus tried to speak, but no one was listening to him now. Lucille's face had changed completely, not composed, not controlled, just exposed. For the first time in my life, I saw all three of them without the performance. No polish, no strategy, just people who had been caught. I lowered the microphone slightly, not dropping it, just done, because there was nothing left to say. The room was already doing the rest. And as the noise rose around us, as the investors shouted, as the calls were made, as everything they built started collapsing in real time, they were left exactly where they deserved to be, standing under the brightest lights in the room, with nowhere to hide. I lowered the microphone and stepped back because there was nothing left for me to control anymore. The room handled the rest. It unraveled fast, faster than I expected. People didn't leave politely. They didn't wait for things to settle or for someone to explain it away. They moved, sharp, urgent, focused on their own losses. Investors clustered in tight circles, voices rising, phones already out. I heard words like pull out, freeze everything, call legal thrown around, like damage control could still catch up to what had just happened. Near the front, the bank executive had already stepped away, speaking into his phone with the kind of tone that didn't leave room for delay. "No, we're calling it in," he said. "Tonight? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight." That was the part that mattered. Within minutes, the crowd started thinning. People weren't interested in speeches anymore. They were interested in getting out before this attached itself to them. One group left, then another, then more. Champagne glasses were abandoned on tables. Half-finished conversations dropped mid-sentence. Chairs pushed back without being tucked in. The music never came back. The lighting didn't change. Everything stayed exactly the same, except the people disappeared. In less than 20 minutes, the room that had been full of noise, attention, and approval turned into something else entirely. Quiet, heavy, like the aftermath of something no one wanted to be associated with. I stood near the edge of the stage and watched it happen. No rush, no urgency, just watched. Because this was the part they never planned for. Not the fall, the silence after. Cassidy was the first one to break completely. Not loudly, not dramatically. She just collapsed, right there near the center of the stage where she had been standing not even half an hour ago talking about legacy. Now she was on the floor, crying, not the controlled kind of crying she used when she needed sympathy. Real, messy, unfiltered. Her hands were shaking. Her makeup had started to run. Her voice didn't form words anymore, just fragments. This isn't she tried. This isn't how. She couldn't finish. Because there was no version of this where she came out on top. Not anymore. Marcus and Lucille didn't go to her. Not right away. They turned on each other first. Of course they did. "This is your fault," Lucille snapped under her breath. "You pushed too far." I pushed. Marcus shot back. "You're the one who made the calls. You told me to handle it. And you handled it like this?" Their voices stayed low at first. Then they didn't. Because once the audience is gone, there's no reason to keep pretending. Years of control, of coordination, of carefully managing how things looked. Gone. Replaced with blame. Immediate. Ugly. Predictable. I stayed where I was. Because this part wasn't for me. This was what they did when there was no one left to impress. Eventually, Marcus turned. Not toward Lucille. Not toward Cassidy. Toward me. And for the first time that night, he didn't look in control. He walked over slowly. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just different. "Valerie," he said. No edge. No authority. Just my name. I didn't move. Didn't step forward. Didn't meet him halfway. He stopped a few feet away. Close enough. Not too close. "You've made your point," he said. I didn't respond. "You don't have to take this any further," he added. There it was. Not an apology. A negotiation. "You've exposed it," he continued. "Fine. It's done. Done." Like this was something you could just close. "Drop the evidence," he said. "Let us fix this." Fix. That word again. "You're still part of this family," he added. "We can figure this out." I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had just stood in front of a room full of people and called me a dead end, now asking for help. Not because he cared, because he needed it. "Please," he said. That was new. Not something he used often. Just, "Don't take it further. Save the family." He didn't say it exactly like that, but that's what he meant. I reached into my bag, slow, deliberate, and pulled out a manila envelope. His eyes followed the movement. Hope. That was interesting. I held it out. He hesitated for half a second, then took it, opened it. His expression changed as he flipped through the contents. First page, foreclosure notice. Official, immediate. Second page, cease and desist. Clean, direct, final. Third page, the complaint. Filed, identity theft, fraud. Not a warning, not a threat. Already done. His hands tightened slightly around the papers. This, he started. I didn't let him finish. You sabotaged everything I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't shake, didn't carry emotion, just facts. You made sure my business would fail, I continued. You set it up so I would lose everything before I even understood what was happening. I took a small step closer. Not aggressive, just clear. But I didn't, I said. He didn't respond, didn't argue, because there was nothing left to argue with. I'm the one who survived, I finished. Silence. He looked down at the papers again, then back at me. But whatever he was going to say, it didn't matter. Not anymore. I turned away. Not slowly, not dramatically. Just turned and walked off the stage, across the room, past the empty tables, past the abandoned glasses, past everything that had been so important just an hour ago. No one stopped me. No one followed. The doors opened easily. The night air was cooler than I expected. Quiet, still, real. I stepped outside and kept walking until the building was behind me. Then I stopped, just for a second, took a breath, and let it out. Not relief, not victory, just done. The next morning I was back in the greenhouse. Same place, same light, same smell of soil and wood. But it felt different. Not lighter, not easier, just mine. I moved through the rows slowly, checking the plants, adjusting what needed adjusting. Routine, simple, real. I stopped near the far end where a new oak sapling had been planted a few weeks earlier. Small, still finding its place. I crouched down and pressed my hands into the soil around it, firming it gently, making sure it held. It didn't look like much. Not yet. But it didn't need to, because it wasn't built on anything fragile. No shortcuts, no borrowed ground, no one else's plan, just time, and something real underneath it. I brushed the dirt from my hands and stood up. Sunlight filtered through the glass above me. Quiet, steady, unshaken, exactly the way I intended to keep it.